Thank you, Jim. BYU faculty and students, our Fulton College of Engineering and Technology, and the BYU Whiteman Center for Global Leadership. Thank you for this invitation, and to you, thank you for spending this time with me this afternoon. It is a privilege for me to be asked to come and talk about the leadership, but the truth is that I feel like I'm preaching to the choir. It is great to be here. As Jim said, I am Angelica Gutierrez. I am a hydrologist at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, in the Office of Water Prediction. Some years ago, throughout my work, I had the fortune to meet some of the BYU faculty staff and see some of the advances in hydrology that were taking place at the university. I immediately knew that what it was presented was groundbreaking in science, in technology, in how that hydrology science was communicated. And so from there on is history. I became your #1 fan of the engineering department. I'm here today because of my good friend and colleague, Dr. Jim Nelson. I have the fortune to work with him in various projects throughout the work that I do in the group on Earth observations. He introduced me to Dr. Greg Warnick, and then when Dr. Warnick asked me to give him a title for my presentation today, I had to, think of the purpose of this talk today. And then I realized that I have been faithful to two things in my life. The first one is to God, and the second one is what I have learned from my ancestors or my roots. I'm going to talk today about my career journey, and I want to start with some experiences that mark my life. The first ones are related to my childhood. I grew up in a small town, the left side, called Buga. It's in the valleys of Colombia. A relatively quiet town. We used to walk to our school. We'll come back and share meals with my parents, lunch and dinner, because the schedule of the school will allow for that. During the weekends, we will visit my grandparents in a town nearby. And my summer vacations, I used to spend in what it was at the time for me, paradise, the picture on the right. In a small town in the middle of nowhere, high in the mountains, and with only 2 streets. My grandfather was a coffee grower, and through time, he achieved, I would say, significant wealth through commerce. He was a leader in his town, in this 2-street town. To give you some background about the circumstances that marked my life, I will also tell you that the first drug lord in Colombia came from this town. The town name is El Águila, and his nickname was Dracula. He came from very poor beginnings, and suddenly he became a very rich man very quickly. I saw him many times coming and sitting in front of the cafe across from our house in a very defiant attitude towards my father and my grandfather, who would be chatting in the balcony in the house. But I think that the one that I most remember is one afternoon he came into my grandfather's store to offer to purchase of one of his farms. And my grandfather just stood up, very calm, and said, "Mr. such and such," I don't remember his name, "I am very sorry, but none of my farms or my land is for sale. So I appreciate very much your offer. And then he came and he continued. He had other customers in his store. He continued like nothing had happened there. In the meantime, I am in a corner shaking because I knew who he was and what he represented. So later that afternoon, I came and I asked him, I said, Abuelo, were you afraid? Don't you know who he is? And he said to me, listen to me because I'm going to say this only once. I don't owe him anything. I don't have business with him. And under God, nothing will ever happen to you or to any of my family. At that moment, I started learning, one, the importance of being selective to whom I was going to have business with in my life. But also when I saw that peace and calm in him, I understood that for him, just by having God as his witness of how he was conducting himself, only that was enough for him to know that nothing will ever happen. And so that is something that I have carried with me throughout my life. When I have difficult situations, I know that my only witness is God. And so he's the only one who cares, and that I should care for his judgment in some way. And so that will bring me to some of my favorite quotes. The most powerful leadership tool you have is your own personal example. My grandfather was giving me a lesson of leadership at that moment through his example. But also he was empowering me by allowing me to know that I could follow his steps in that aspect, knowing that only God was going to be my witness, and so that everything will be well. And I'm going to come back to this in the next experience I have. My next slide is about my father. He was a judge, initially of the minor court in the town where I grew up, and later on he became the chief of the Supreme Court of Colombia. And in the 80s, we had to deal with all the drug cartel, and something that I remember when we were in this small town, one afternoon, a Sunday, a man came knocking at the door with some gifts, and he was asking for my father, and so my dad came in, and the odd part of this was that this man was with gifts, and my father seemed like he didn't know who he was. So he came in and he identified himself, and he said, well, I was just released from jail. I have been in this place for 15 years, and I just come to say thank you, because you could have imposed 50 years of the maximum sentence to what I did, and yet you had compassion, and you understood the circumstances in which all the crime happened, and you apply only 15 years. So I want to say thank you to you. At that moment, I understood that there is sometimes when you have, as a leader, you have to make very hard decisions. And even though you have to impose difficult penalties on, you cannot you cannot let aside your compassion. You must remain aware that we all commit mistakes because we are humans, and just follow your heart, let your heart lead into that. The second example I have, my father was part of the Rotary Club International, and among the many things that he was able to do was actually to initiate an exchange, a student exchange program. Nobody believed that because we were in a small town, not in the capital, not in Bogota, the majority of people came and said, well, that's not possible because we are just in a small town. How are you going to start a program of such magnitude exchanging with countries like the US and Europe? And regardless of how many obstacles he found, he made it possible. So I want to go back to my last two. Leadership is someone who demonstrates what is possible. And it's not a position or a title. It's only an action of example. The last one, he didn't have a position or a title within that Rotary Club. He was just one more member, and he made things happen. That was in 1880s. Today, the program, I think that the last number I heard from that program was 300 people has been an exchange student through that program that he initiated. So these examples allow me to show you what I think that a leader should, the foundational principles that you should consider eventually. Integrity is, so what do you look for? My dad always said, you don't need money, all you need is the trust of the people. And the only way for you to gain that trust is actually by you having integrity. The second one is you need to have a sound sense of self-worth. Not only loving what you are and recognizing the many qualities that you have, but also knowing that there are imperfections and that every day we need to work on improve those imperfections. The third one is awareness of others. Sometimes when I hear my kids, Mommy, I need this, Mommy, I need, Mommy, it comes to my mind, it's like, please stop. You can't focus on what you need. Look at your surroundings, and then you will see that what you need is actually nothing really. And building meaningful relations. Sometimes when we are in all this of new projects, new programs, you could go into, well, it's just one more project or it's just one more person. Make sure that you really engage with the people that you are establishing. Even if nothing is happening right now, who knows, maybe in the future that person may be the turning point for a successful activity in your life. So don't underestimate anyone. And I'm going to tell here a funny story. In 2011, I was forced by my organization to, okay, what are you doing? What are you going to do? Show us results. And so one of the students in Colombia came to a conference or something. He stayed at my house. And over dinner, he said, you know what? I know this person in this organization, a huge organization in Colombia. And I said, well, so inside I said, is this possible that this person, he's only a student at the university, how can he know the director of this huge organization and claim that is his friend? But anyhow, I went along with the story and I said, okay, why don't you put a Skype call and let's all talk? Well, it happened that this person, yes, it was his friend. He was going to retire soon, and he wanted to have a major event, an international event. So during the conversation, we ended up having organizing an international meeting at his institution, which was a major success, 8 countries participating. We brought up like 50 people from different countries. And the student always remind me, he says, you know, Angelica, it was great that you invited me to stay at your house and that we have dinner, because all this is possible because of that small conversation. So never underestimate people that you find along your way. Service through collaboration. I have never believed that you can do anything alone. There is always, always, always collaboration in front of anything else. Either through major institutions, either even with another student or a professor or somebody, you always need of somebody. We cannot do things alone. Responsibility and commitment. Make sure that if someday somebody asks you to do something, don't say yes just to get him out of your hair. Say yes if you really are committed to follow through. And be responsible for whatever you are committing yourself. At that moment is basically you are building that trust. Now be willing to take risk and get out of your comfort zone. In the presentation, Jim said that I was at the USGS for some years. And I was having really good time at the USGS. I was leading the water quality program in Baltimore. Life was good. Then one afternoon, I received a call from a good friend, and he said, Angelica, it happens that NOAA wants to start a program in water quality forecasting. And I was thinking that maybe you could be the person to start that program. I knew that, I said, yeah, I mean, I have the experience. I know the legal part through, the EPA experience. I also know the modeling part. I do that almost in my sleep. But now there is a caveat there. We don't know if the models that we have are good enough to do this. So at that moment, I realized, okay, so what if I quit here and I get there and it happens that the models don't work and we can't initiate that program of water quality. By the way, we haven't started yet. So that has been 7 years. So I said, well, I'm going to take the risk, even if we can't start, this is going to push me out of my comfort zone, which it did. As soon as I got to the National Weather Service in NOAA, we started evaluating the mathematical models, and we realized that that was not possible. And so somebody said, well, you have to do just hydraulics. I did that for about a year. After a year, I said, this is not for me. I really need to do something else with my life. Otherwise, I'm going to die here frustrated. I went to my boss and I said, you know what, let me go. Let me go to some of the other line offices. And I took a year off. I went to Oceans. I helped started the ocean acidification program. Spent a year there. But throughout the year, I did a self-analysis, and I said, well, one of the things that I want to do with my life, and I have always, and I thought that I was doing that through doing mathematical modeling and science and doing research for NASA, was to have an impact in society. But I realized that there was a gap between the scientists and then the ones who really make decisions. And I said, well, maybe I need to jump into the group. Not that the managers don't do anything, since this is being recorded, but I need to go into that group, and maybe from there I can have a more efficient communication. So at that moment, I made the decision of stopping doing research. I got out of the university, came for NOAA, and I started working through the group on Earth observations that moment that this was presented. And now here I am. Decisiveness. I took the chance when I moved into NOAA. And so that was a complex uncertainty that led me to very hard decisions in my life. Do I regret it? No. It changed completely the course of me being a scientist and an engineer. But here we are. So that will brings me now to something that I feel more comfortable talking about, the group on Earth observations. This is one of the greatest opportunities that I have had until now. The group on Earth observations of GEO is a group of 102 country members throughout the world. We have 16 in the Americas. And this is just a concept of what the group on Earth observations does. We were mapping here, many of you have heard about the Sustainable Development Goals. So we were mapping the Sustainable Development Goals from UNESCO with the activities and different groups that we have in the group on Earth observations, which is not a UNESCO organization. GEO is an organization of volunteer countries at the ministerial level, and we work on societal benefit areas, which include water, agriculture, biodiversity and ecosystems, health, etc. So there are two big areas that I work with. One is water, and I will talk later on about GeoGLOS, which is the global sustainable, global water sustainability. And the second one is AmeriGeos, which is the initiative of the 16 countries in the Americas. So we were mapping, these are some of the community activities in water that are now under our larger GeoGLOS initiative. But within GEO, we have GeoBond, for example. This is the initiative, a global initiative for biodiversity and ecosystems. We have GFOI, which is focused on the application of remote sensing for forest and carbon sequestration. And under GFOI, then there are other activities like ecosystem accounting, mangrove monitoring, etc. In water is basically three things. Only two are here represented. Blue Planet, which is the part of oceans, and then GeoGLOS, which is the part of fresh water. As I said, in the Americas, we have 16 countries. At this moment, we are inviting the Dominican Republic to be part of GEO, and this is the list of the members that we currently have. AmeriGeos started in 2014, actually, through the activities that we were doing from a grassroots group that I will show later on. That grassroots work actually led to that the principals, which are the ministers of environment and water in the countries, would say, you know, let's work together. And so they got together in Bogota, Colombia in 2014 and decided to work in 4 areas of priority: water, agriculture, biodiversity and ecosystems, and disaster. And this year, we were fortunate enough to obtain a grant from the federal Geographic Data Committee, that is all the federal agencies. And they are, at the moment, building us it's a platform, because it's not only a portal to access data, remote sensing and in situ data, but also a place to have tools. And one of the tools that we have there is HydroServer, developed here at BYU. So this is the grassroots group. In 2009, I was doing research for NASA, and they invited me to Lima, Peru, to present what I was doing in water quality. And at that moment, we decided to create this group of friends who will work together and try to do things together. And that's how basically CIELIC was born. So CIELIC went to, we still organized the largest capacity building under GEO. In 2011, we had different classes. So the way is different, the capacity building that we do, because for one, oceans and freshwater, we are together. So it's only a concept, a single concept of water in our group. And second, because in the majority of cases, at least the capacity building from the US is the agencies. For example, NASA goes, and NASA said has its own program, so they go and they do their single course. And so the way that we organize is we gather the instructors from the region, from the same pool of people, from the community of CIELIC, and we put together 3-4 courses at a time. And we partner all this activity with academic universities. So the first one up there, the first and the second, 2011 and 2015, has been with the Naval Academy in Cartagena, Colombia. The last time, in 2015, we have 105 participants. That is crazy for capacity building. And all our budget was, we will get grants from NOAA, NASA, the World Bank, and that money is used to bring participants from different countries into the courses, and also the instructors. Then this year, under the AmeriGeos, we said, okay, we are going to have an AmeriGeos week. We partner with the National University in Bogota, Colombia, and we have 180 participants. The interesting part is that the participants are not students from universities, but they are staff from government organizations. And that is one of the #1 priority in all the region, because the people who's already in a government institution, they don't have the opportunity that you have right now of sitting in your classroom and taking, graduate courses, or that opportunity doesn't exist for the people who's already working. So what we do is we set up a week of capacity building exclusively for that kind of community. And it has been a major success. At this moment, we are talking to Costa Rica and see if the next one in 2017, we will host the capacity building in Costa Rica. Yeah, I don't have a picture here. Now, GeoGlows. 5 more minutes. Last year, NASA and NOAA, each one had different ideas, and we were going to launch our own thing. So I had the fortune to co-chair all this work in the Americas with a good friend from NASA. And so Nancy and I started talking and said, you know what, we need to put these things together, otherwise this is going to be a huge work for both agencies, and we are going to be competing for funding. So GeoGlows is actually a NASA idea. We came up with the idea from NOAA, then we decided to put it under GeoGlows. And like that, then many other things happen. It happens that Jim has been instructor, Jim Nelson, has been an instructor for those capacity building activities that I showed before. And an institution in Colombia, they decided to implement what they had learned at that capacity building. And so they have hydroserver for the Magdalena River in Colombia. I understand that the Dominican Republic is also using hydroserver. Also under GeoGlows, so GeoGlows is basically an umbrella, a huge umbrella, and many different water activities are under that umbrella. GeoNetcast is a broadcasting system, just exactly like you have in your dish network, that you receive all the information through channels. What we do is we send all the remote sensing information, and there are users who have a server and they collect that information. It is very useful for countries where the internet doesn't work very well. And this week, actually, we just announced we have 50 stations in the region. That is a major achievement. In 2014, there were 20 stations. So our AmeriGeo's work, an outreach campaign, has really increased the system. Of course, we have the national water model is part of GeoGlows. And then we have a collaboration trying to implement the same concepts for Canada in the Great Lakes region. Just an example, this is just a series of examples of the different activities in the America under GeoGlows. GeoGlows is global, so there are projects in Europe, there are projects in Africa, in Asia. These are only showing the projects in. Now, this is the class from Dr. Nelson. And as I said before, you always need to collaborate with somebody. You need to put the word partnership in front of you at all times, because it's the only way to achieve meaningful things. We had a partnership with Dr. Nelson, and he came and opened actually new partnerships. At that moment was with the Joint Research Center of the European Union. Then we are still building partnerships throughout the Americas. So this is just something to always have in front of you. So my final remarks. I have a weird belief. I believe that all the blessings that are now, or opportunities that are presented to me, is not because I'm such a great person who, deserve all this. No, I always believe that I receive blessings for what some of my ancestors have done in the past. And that whatever I do good in my life is going to be for my kids. So I always try to pass that message to when I do this type of talks. Do not forget your legacy blessings. You are here because of your parents, because there's people who's making an effort somewhere for you to be sitting here today. Be grateful for being busy. Sometimes when I have tons of things, I'm like, oh my Lord, how am I going to get things done? And so immediately, my first reaction is like, then I realize, well, thank God I have things to do. I cannot imagine my life being at home, just sitting without my kids. having to cook for them or having to do homework. Thank God I have all these opportunities to serve either through the community or through my family. So be thankful for the opportunities and the deadlines that you have to meet. And my last one is be willing to be an apprentice. We all make mistakes. And you know, that is part of life in general. And I like this. This is not actually my words. I like that it says the only failure in life is not to try what we really want. The rest is learning that makes us wiser, stronger, more humble, more human, and more capable. So just see every opportunity that you have as something wonderful. Don't ever lose your passion for things. Be passionate about what you do. And if you find that what you are doing is not what it really moves you, then it's time to move on and find what your heart really is looking for. So do what your heart dictates. Find what you are passionate about. Pursue. Do not let go. Take risks. Dare to fail. Meaningful in love in what you do, even if lovingly mean defrauding others, but never ever defrauding yourselves. This is your moment. Starting today is the time to participate, to exercise moral leadership so that you can leave a legacy in this time. Thank you so much.